Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, which is Microsoft Licensing in the Public Cloud. Today, here we have John Gorton, who is our Microsoft Licensing Practice Manager at Bytes, and he'll be running through the topics of the webinar. Before we start, I'm just going to run through some very quick housekeeping with you all. Just to let you know that during the webinar you will be muted, but you may submit any questions that you have via the questions box on the right hand side of your screen. There will be a very short Q&A session at the end of the webinar to answer any of the submitted questions. The webinar will be recorded and also made available after the webinar. We'll send this out to you. And please, if you could complete the short critique form at the end of the webinar where you can request a call back for one of our Bytes specialists, it'd be great if you could just fill this in and we can have a look at the feedback. I'm now going to pass over to John, who will be running through the webinar. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cassie. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Good morning. We're going to talk about the different ways to pay for software running in the public cloud, whether that be consuming the license as a service or through bring your own license. So I'm going to talk about license mobility, where you have the ability to bring licenses to Azure or AWS and how to maintain compliance. And then I'll talk through some offers specifically for Azure, which will help you reduce some costs when running workloads in Azure. So when you create a VM in Azure, you can choose the Windows Server operating system, and you can also choose which software to include. So for example, SQL Server. You've got a couple of options with regards to how you pay for software, the actual software itself. So a couple of things to note about the pay-as-you-go option. So there's no upfront investments in terms of the purchasing of perpetual licenses and maintaining any software assurance on those. It takes care of the license compliance because you're paying as part of the service itself. You don't have to keep track of any the number of cores or processes or the number of users connecting to the server itself. With regards to Windows Server specifically, when you consume Windows Server as a service, no client access licenses are needed. So if all of your workloads were running in Azure or AWS, then that takes care of Windows Server cows. Costs are based on actual usage, so with Azure that's by the minute. So when a VM is shut down, obviously you're no longer being charged for the software. Therefore that provides a more flexible option if you've got workloads that aren't running all the time. And finally on that, if you've got cross-charging within your business, this provides a true way of monitoring and recording the amount of money that's actually being used for the project, and therefore allowing cross-charging to be much easier recorded. Within the gallery, there are several options for allowing you to provision VMs running older versions of Windows operating systems. So for example, with Windows Server, you can install a Windows Server VM from 2008 R2 all the way up to 2016. With Windows Server specifically, it includes 2 remote desktop services, client access licenses for administration and management purposes. If you need additional RDS cows, you can purchase those through any of Microsoft's volume licensing agreements. Bring those to Azure through license mobility, and I'll cover more on license mobility shortly. But that's to say that software assurance is required to use those cows in Azure. With regards to SQL, SQL Server is available. It's a license per core when you license it in a third-party or AWS or Azure. You can install versions from 2008 R2 all the way through to 2016. When you license per core, the license is based on the number of actual cores within the VM. So again, similar to Windows Server, no client access licenses are required in that model. Now, an important note when you consume SQL as a service or as part of the VM itself, there's no failover rights. So you may be familiar with the concept that within volume licensing, as a software assurance benefit, is the rights to have a passive instance of SQL running in a standby, ready to take over from the active server in the event of a disaster. When you're licensing, it's kind of paper money or pay-as-you-go. All instances of SQL must be licensed whether they're active or passive. There's also an option for licensing SQL Server as a service, so true as a service, so SQL Server database. I'm not going to touch on that today, but that's also an option, obviously with AWS and Azure. So I mentioned license mobility, and specifically license mobility through software assurance. So license mobility is a software assurance benefit. When you purchase a license from Microsoft, you have the option to purchase software assurance at the point of purchase. It's not something that can be added on after the purchase of the license. So an important note there is to make sure you purchase it at the point you buy the license. So it's included within some agreements. So the enterprise agreement is mandatory. Things like the server and cloud enrollment, again, part of the program, but it's optional with programs such as the MPSA and open license programs. So software assurance includes various benefits, things like new version rights, so the ability to upgrade to any new versions that are released during the time that you've got active software assurance. The one we're going to touch on today is the license mobility through software assurance benefit. So this benefit is one that allows you to reassign licenses that you've purchased to the public cloud, so Azure AWS or even third-party data centers. Without software assurance, you can assign it to a third-party data center or AWS, but it has to be on dedicated instances, so the actual hardware has to be dedicated to you as well. Not all Microsoft Server products have license mobility, so it's worth checking with your Bytes account manager before reassigning the license. If you're familiar with the document, the Microsoft product terms lists all of the software which is eligible for license mobility. An important note is that you have to maintain software assurance on both the server license and any associated CALs. So for example, if you're moving SharePoint server into Azure, you'd have to maintain software assurance both on any server licenses and all of the SharePoint CALs. And one thing, and again I'll touch on this a bit later on, is when you're reassigning licenses, you need to complete a license verification form within 10 days of 10 days of deploying the software. So here I've included a table to show what Microsoft products include license mobility and which ones are available on a pay-per-minute or pay-as-you-go consumption basis. Again, I would refer to the product terms for a full list of software because it does change as new products are released or new products are updated. If we look at license mobility in more detail, there's kind of two options for licensing most Microsoft Server products. So we've got per core or per server with client access licenses. So most server products are eligible for license mobility, including those that are licensed in the server plus CAL model. So this is where you license the actual server itself and then you buy client access licenses. So products such as SQL Server, SharePoint, Exchange, Skype for Business, etc., they're all licensed or can be licensed in the server and CAL model. As previously mentioned, you need to have software assurance on both the server licenses and the client access licenses. And when you reassign server plus CAL licenses, because you're licensing the server, it doesn't matter how many cores or processes are within the server. So obviously you don't need to count those. There is an exception there which is with regards to SQL Server Enterprise. So with SQL Server Enterprise, with the release of 2012, Microsoft stopped selling new licenses for SQL Server Enterprise in the server and CAL model, And they also introduced a cap of 20 virtual processors per license. So obviously that's something you do need to take into consideration when assigning legacy SQL Server Enterprise Server and CAL licenses to Azure, or indeed any third party. So core licenses, products like SQL Server and BizTalk, they can be licensed on a per core basis. When you're licensing in Azure, for example, the license metric is virtual CPU or hyperthread, and it's obviously not physical cores itself. So with that in mind, you need to bring over the right number of licenses based on the size of the VM, remembering that SQL per core is licensed in packs of 2, so one license equals 2 cores. So to give you an example, an Azure A3 VM has 4 cores, so you'd need to bring over 2 times 2 core packs. Also, bear in mind that when licensing SQL in a virtual machine, whether on premises or in Azure, there's always a minimum of 4 core licenses required, so 2 times 2 core packs. So previously mentioned on the SQL failover rights, if you're consuming SQL as a service, then failover rights don't apply. However, when you're bringing your own license to Azure through license mobility, those failover rights do apply. So you only need to license the active server on the basis that the passive node is not being used for any workloads. Operating system licenses for Windows Server or Windows Desktop, they don't have license mobility. Okay, so an important note there. I'll cover how you can use your existing Windows Server licenses through the Azure Hybrid Use benefit later in this webinar. Also, some desktop products such as Office, Visio and Project, they're not eligible for license mobility unless licensed through Office 365. So for example, you can't run a traditional copy of Office Professional Plus in an Azure VM, but you can use Office 365 Pro Plus. Subtle difference in the license terms. When it comes to the provisioning of virtual machines within Azure, you've got multiple options. You can either upload a pre-configured image, you can provision a VM and then install the application software afterwards, or you can select from a pre-configured bring your own license image. So as the diagram shows here, you can see the VMs that are prefixed with BYOL. These effectively come with the software pre-installed, and then you're not charged for the software that's installed on those. So an important note here is that it's not possible to change the licensing model of pay per minute SQL VM. It's not possible to change from a pay per minute to bring your own license, or vice versa. So when you provision a BYOL image, you have to accept the following terms. So this image contains the full version of SQL Server 2016 Enterprise to be used for license mobility for software assurance. So bring your own license or BYOL. SQL Server licensing cost will not be charged for this image. You must acknowledge that you have a valid SQL Server Enterprise license and provide the necessary BYOL information to Microsoft within 10 days. So Microsoft operate on a trust basis, so trust that you've got the licenses available that you're bringing over with active software assurance. The same applies to other public cloud providers, but obviously they'll make a statement to say that it's your responsibility to be fully compliant. So within 10 days of deploying, you have to complete a license verification form which tells Microsoft that you have assigned your licenses to the public cloud. Again, the same applies to AWS or any third party. Once you've completed the form, you can submit that through your Bytes account manager and we'll log it with Microsoft. So the form must be completed on the initial and subsequent deployment of licensed products under license mobility. Also the initial usage of RDS CALs through the RDS CAL extended use right. So this is the effectively license mobility for RDS CALs. And then when you're renewing software assurance at the end of each agreement, again, you need to complete a new form. So with regards to reporting, unfortunately, there's no way currently of pulling a report from Azure which shows which VMs have a bring your own license assigned to them, whether deployed through the image gallery or whether you've deployed the software kind of after provisioning the VM itself. So it is important to keep track of the license verification forms. Obviously, in the event of an audit, you'd have to prove that you've A, got the licenses, and secondly, that you've completed the verification forms as well. So I mentioned earlier, when licensing SQL Server on premises, you have the rights to run a passive failover server. So this is a software assurance benefit. It became a software assurance benefit in 2012. Prior to that, it was just included within the server license itself. So now, as I said, to do that on premises, you need to have active software assurance. The passive server mustn't be serving any data to clients, so it can't be used for any workloads, including things like backups. In Azure or AWS, when you're consuming on a pay-as-you-go or pay-per-minute basis, those rights don't apply, so you have to license both the active and the passive nodes. When licensing using bring your own license, those rights do apply, but as previously stated, you have to have active software assurance. So even at the point of software assurance expiring on an agreement, you'd have to renew that to allow for bring your own license, A, to be used in Azure or AWS, and secondly, to provide the rights to the passive instance. One important note is that the passive VM size must either be identical to the active VM size or lesser. So the compute power can't be more than the kind of active server itself. So I'm just going to talk through some ways to reduce costs specifically around Azure. So the first one I'm going to talk through is the Azure hybrid use benefit. So this is an Azure specific benefit that enables customers with active software assurance on Windows Server to use those licenses in Azure and only pay for the base compute rate. So that means you only pay for Windows VMs, but you're charged at the Linux rates. Okay. With this, you can save up to 40%. The way to calculate the cost, if there is an Azure calculator publicly available on Microsoft's website, if you just compare the Windows VM with the Linux VM, that will show you what the cost savings are there. So in terms of what your entitlements are, each 2-processor license or set of 16 core licenses, if you're licensing in the newer core model, provide you 2 instances of up to 8 cores, or you can have 1 instance of up to 16 cores. These are VMs running in Azure. So you can also stack licenses, so if you need more cores, you can stack licenses. So for example, for a 32-core VM, you could assign 2 processor licenses excuse me, with active software assurance, and that will give you 1 VM of 32 cores. The Azure hybrid use benefit for standard edition allows you to license the license a VM once. So either you assign it to your on-premises environment, or you assign it to Azure. You can't use both. Whereas for data center edition, that allows you simultaneous usage of the license. So you can continue using Windows Server Data Center on premises, and it gives you the rights to those 2 VMs in Azure with 8 cores each, or 1 VM with 16 cores. So if you've got active software assurance for data center and you're running workloads in Azure, it would make sense to enable the hybrid use benefit for those VMs because you've got the rights already today. The Azure Compute pre-purchase plan, that offers you discounts of up to 63% off the standard kind of prices on Azure. This is for an upfront pre-purchase of 12 months for a particular instance. So you'd have to commit to Microsoft for 12 months based on the instance family, the size, the region, and the operating system. So if you've got steady state or predictable workloads which are always on, then the CPP or Compute Pre-Purchase program is obviously something to look at. A couple of things to keep in mind are that you are committing for 12 months, so you can't change the size of the VM. If you do change it and it's not a VM size that you've selected for the pre-purchase, then it will just come out of your normal Azure mandatory commitment. Another offer is the Enterprise Dev Test. So Enterprise Dev Test gives you a great way to run development and testing workloads on Azure. It comes with numerous advantages, but one of those being similar to the hybrid use benefit, where Windows VMs are effectively billed at the Linux rate. It also allows Visual Studio subscribers to install the software that's included within the Visual Studio subscription, or MSDN as it was, to run that software in an Azure VM without incurring the additional costs as well. So Bytes has an Azure commercial analysis service. You can speak to your Bytes account manager regarding this, but effectively we will take your usage information from Azure, we'll analyze that information and then show you through the various offers that are available from Microsoft, where you can effectively save lots of money through running workloads in Azure. Typically, we can show savings of kind of up to 50% through the various different offers. So, like I say, speak to your Bytes account manager, and that's something we can assist you with. So, to summarize, the pay-as-you-go model is probably the most flexible if you've got workloads which you run for short periods or aren't typically always on. It means that you can pay for those as a service without obviously the upfront investment of buying license and software assurance. To take advantage of license mobility, you have to have software assurance, but it can reduce the costs if you've got workloads that are kind of always on. So we can, again, as part of the analysis service, compare the differences between the pay-as-you-go option versus using your volume licensing agreement to purchase perpetual subscription licenses. The Azure hybrid use benefit allows you to use Windows Server workloads. In Azure, it's an Azure specific benefit. It doesn't allow you to use or take advantage of that in AWS or on a third-party data center. But as I said, for data center licenses, you can use those rights in Azure and on premises at the same time. So there's no need to kind of reassign licenses there. If you've already got licenses in place, then as I said, that's a no-brainer to kind of look at that. There's various different offers for enterprise agreement customers outside of the ones I've spoken about today. So again, the Bytes commercial service will kind of have a look at that and highlight which offers may be suitable for you. So with that, we'll open the Q&A. We'll take a look at what questions you've got. So please submit your questions via the questions box, or if you want to submit questions later, then please email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk.
Thank you, John. I hope that was useful for everybody. I'm sure that it was. I'm just checking if there are any questions now. So if you do have anything that you'd like to ask, please, as John said, just submit them into the box. Doesn't seem like we have anything at this time, so I'm hoping that's a good thing. But if you do have any questions later on, then please feel free to, you can email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk, or if you've got an Bytes account manager, you can speak to them. Someone has just quickly popped a question up. Someone's asked if the slides will be distributed. Yes, we can send a copy of the slides out along with the recording. That's no problem at all. Yeah, if there's nothing else, then oh, John, there's just one quick question.
Okay.
Hi, John. If you have Hub VM in Azure, can you change it to be non-Hub?
No, so Microsoft are working on various different options right now to enable Hub. Actually, if you've already got a VM running in Azure, it is difficult to enable Hub on that existing VM. You effectively have to pull it down and put it back up into Azure with a pre-configured Hub. But Microsoft are working on that as a kind of matter of urgency to enable existing VMs to take advantage of the hybrid use benefit.
Thank you, John. Looks like that's all from everybody there. That's everything from us. So thank you for taking this short time out of your morning to join us, and we'll send out the webinar shortly. Thank you for joining, everyone. Bye-bye.